Um, I'm going to let these folks introduce themselves, and then we'll get rolling, so take it away.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Fridge. I get to work with John Grimmer at Verde CO2. John covered who we are. We're a developer of CO2 permanent sequestration projects, currently along the Gulf Coast in Texas and Louisiana, in California, and in the Rocky Mountains.
My name is Carlos Alonso. I'm with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, that's BOEM. We are stewards for all of the oil and gas or mineral resources in the offshore OCS. So I'm the section chief for the Resource Studies Program and the Resource Evaluation Office in the Gulf of Mexico region.
Hi, I'm Nick Malkowitz. I'm with ProGeo Corporation. We focus on subsurface technical development, so the site characterization piece, the construction of wells, operating of wells, and workovers for CO2 storage and energy transition projects.
Hi, I'm Nick Noppinger. I'm Senior VP of Corporate Development at Wolf Carbon Solutions US. We are a energy transition infrastructure company backed by CPP Investments, which is the largest pension fund in Canada. We look at all types of energy transition with an initial focus on carbon capture and sequestration. We're looking all across the lower 48 in the US, with a focus right now on our previously announced Midwest project called the Mount Simon Hub. It'll go from eastern Iowa into central Illinois.
Cool. So we're going to try to cover 4 topics. Characteristics of a good site, the regional hubs, which everyone's talking about. These guys have actual projects going. Regulatory landscapes, we've heard a lot about. They're the ones actually going through it. And then technology trends. So Nick, I'm going to start with you all the way down at the end.
Sure.
And when you think about the sites that you guys had evaluated and then what you're doing, can you just talk through the storage space, the ownership, community engagement, which I know you guys have taken, and then the investor interest, and then just kind of roll it this way. And Nick, I know you've got some personal experience around that. Carlos, you've got a view of what's coming. And then Charles, you've got your view on both. Also have your view, especially from the investor standpoint in quality projects. So Nick, I'll go to you.
Sure. So I think I'll try to attack this chronologically and just see where that goes. So we identified the Eastern Midwest as really our focus point for kind of the first project. The reason for that is that the Mount Simon formation covers most of Illinois and has been proven by ADM with the only 2 Class 6 permitted wells in the U.S. and they've been running that successfully for 10 years. So, we wanted to be capital efficient. At the time, 45Q was $50. Even at the current $85 a ton, you need to work within a fixed revenue stream, and so you got to be capital efficient. So we weren't looking to pick up emission points all across the Midwest. We're really targeting kind of that eastern Iowa and central Illinois area. We landed a deal with ADM, which was great because for several reasons. Number one, they've proven out their abilities to do sequestration, which I mentioned before. Secondly, they have two of the largest ethanol plants in the U.S. Right there in eastern Iowa, Clinton and Cedar Rapids, and then also they're just a great partner from a development standpoint, and also from a stakeholder standpoint. So before we got the deal with ADM, you touched on this, stakeholder engagement. Our affiliate Wolf Midstream built 8 Alberta Carbon Frontline, which is a massive 150-mile carbon system up in Alberta. And we learned a lot from that. And one of the things we learned is that you need to get out to the community leaders, other types of politicians, landowners, other types of stakeholders as soon as possible to educate them on the various parts of the value chain and let them know who you are. So we were out there a year and a half ago before we had a deal with ADM, and we concerns of the landowners. We got to educate them a little bit on what carbon sequestration really is about, because it's very new to them, even though they have 2 wells outside Decatur. There are a lot of concerns about the unknowns. And actually what we found in the past year and a half is that the landowners in that area have done a complete 180 and to a large extent have subscribed to the very low risks around carbon sequestration and outside formation. And are looking to work with us on pore space development.
Cool. And Nick, why don't you pick it up from there? And I know one of the things that you're talking about is the whole pore space unitization and ownership, and also the primacy between state and federal, and the complexities. I think a lot of people as they're rolling into the space are going to be learning a lot more than they thought. So I'll let you pick it up since you do a lot of the project development.
Yeah, we've heard a fair bit about that primacy question today for sure, and the need for additional legislation around pore space ownership, long-term liability, and all that on a state-by-state basis. Kind of riffing off of what Nick was talking about here, that particular project in the Illinois Basin was one of the DOE flagship projects and has been going for nearly 20 years now. And Tracy mentioned it. And one of the challenges that we're going to have as an industry is taking the lessons we've learned from those DOE-sponsored projects and bringing them into the oil and gas type mentality of scaling this development and bring it into a nationwide deployment. And so looking at how do we talk to the communities, one, in a way that makes sense to the people that we're talking to and in a way that they can accept and understand. But also, how do we permit these with the regulators? Because you're dealing with a number of different regulatory authorities on a state-by-state basis, whether it's the US EPA or the different state agencies that may or may not have primacy at the time, in addition to local agencies. And so making sure you're thinking about that and approaching the project in a way that makes sense for that and fits the project timeline. Like we heard some folks earlier say, with the EPA right now, we're looking at a 2-year timeline from the day you submit your permit, your Class 6 permit application, to when you get, ultimately authorization to inject, assuming everything goes well. Now, I think a number of different states are working on, accelerating that through obtaining the primacy, but still, that's a big challenge in the development of these projects. And aside from the fact of getting access to the pore space itself and getting access to the surface facilities. And I think that's where, oil and gas experience and know-how can come in with using the efficiencies and the learnings over the years of how do we actually build out these projects.
Cool. And Carlos, the whole offshore space is still in development from a framework standpoint, but there was some really interesting work that you've been doing over the last couple of years around depleted reservoirs and what would be the opportunities. So I'll kind of let you pick it up and take it from there.
Sure. So we started this program with looking at carbon storage in the Gulf of Mexico about 2 years ago. Back in November of 2021, the bipartisan infrastructure law got passed, right? We've talked about that a lot today. And so the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, we've had, that gave the authority to the Secretary of the Interior to promulgate offshore regulations for the injection of CO2 into the subsurface for long-term sequestration. And we have 1 year to promulgate those regulations. That's coming up at November 22nd of this year. So this is going to be a joint rule between BOEM and BSEE, the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement. And we're working together to collaborate to come up with a robust and comprehensive draft that we can send out for public comment at the end of the year. And we'd encourage everyone to make their comments and provide some feedback on this rule. That's at regulations.gov. And so, and from there, we've been doing a lot of outreach. We've met with the DOE on several occasions. We've had interactions with a variety of stakeholders, government, non-government, academia, industry. We've done a lot in order to bring us up to speed to help develop this rule. And so we've taken quite a few things into consideration. One of the slides from this morning's discussion with Fred from Schlumberger, he showed a series of the storage, the injection, and the monitoring. And that was a great slide because I developed one very similar on to discuss a lot of the things that we were taking into consideration in this rulemaking. And it really covers the gambit of a CCS project that you would see in the offshore environment, starting from a pre-lease, where we would look at our NEPA analysis, going to the actual leasing, the size and of the offerings, the permittal and the plan submissions, as well as the injection phase, the monitoring, all the way through site closure and decommissioning. And we do recognize that within the Gulf of Mexico 2 types of storage, right? We've talked about it today: depleted reservoirs and saline aquifers, and we've identified risk associated with both of those, as well as the advantages of storing within the individual types of containers, right? Some of the work that I had done that Reed was referencing was related to the depleted reservoirs. So when we first got tasked with the carbon storage in the offshore environment, being able to pull from our database of all the oil and gas data was immediately one of the first things that we could do. Query out all the depleted reservoirs, and there's over 23,000 depleted reservoirs in the offshore Gulf of Mexico. And then we took the approach of how can we begin to call that down as a project to identify some of what we were calling a Tier 1 classification of depleted reservoirs. I understand there's a lot of risk with depleted reservoirs, and it was mentioned today with legacy wells and all that, but this was our first step out into what we can do to provide for some information in the offshore region. We were able to filter that down by looking at the depth of the production, and we identified 15,000 reservoirs and within the 3 to 10,000 foot depth range of where the CO2 is stable in supercritical phase. And then looking at a host of several criteria based on production, proximity to shore, and water depths, we were able to call out 21 depleted reservoirs. Now, you'd have given this task to any 4 other geoscientists, and they'd have come up with a different list of reservoirs from 23,000. But this was our first pass. They were reservoirs that provided a lot of production. They had a lot of legacy wells and infrastructure, so there's risk associated with that. But it was a good pass that identified a series of wells and reservoirs for us to take on to the next step, which is what we were doing with characterizing these sites and going in and doing the individual mapping and trying to calculate the storage capacities for those, which that's one of the main disparities that we see between the depleted reservoirs in the Gulf of Mexico as well as the saline aquifers is the size. And so we've talked about the economy of scale today a lot. The depleted reservoirs and where we're calculating, you're looking at megatons of storage capacity, whereas some of the saline aquifers that we've analyzed for storage capacity could be in the hundreds of megatons to gigatons of potential for storage capacity in the offshore environment. So, there's additional risks and considerations with each one of those, but that's some of the work that we've initially started.
John, we're moving offshore. Call Tim Duncan at Talis. Tell him he has competition.
Yep, that's what I was wanting you to talk about, because I'm pretty sure you just laid down some really cool information that, to the point, is going to prompt some more activity. Charles, when we talk about the investment side of it and quality projects, and also just the different pools of capital that are queuing up, clearly government's putting a lot of support. There's also a lot of private capital that's wanting to come play in this space, but they have a different risk tolerance and whatnot. So both the storage from a characterization, but also from a business model and the financing, what are you seeing?
Well, we've seen a big shift, obviously, since the IRA passed. It's funny how we started this business a few years ago, pre-January of 2021, when we had some clarification from Treasury. No one wanted to invest in the space whatsoever, so you relied upon your own money and federal dollars. John hit on a lot of the thresholds at our investing base, and really, for us, it's joint venture partners. The source of sink matching is really important. You talked about characteristics of different locations. There are risks for each one, and we can't look beyond the community outreach we've all talked about today, the environmental and social justice issues that are going on. I mean, we were in D.C. meeting with the EPA and then also Region 6 with Charles McGuire, and they want to know our plan on day one. And so Getting the investor base after the IRA, we're seeing traditional private equity really wanting to put into the space. But you have to be able to put a project together. Some investors want to see you've got an emitter agreement. Those are obviously complicated to get. You've got your right-of-way, and you've got your storage facility or sink established. And then all the legal and land issues that go along with the storage. I will tell you that a lot of folks now are taking the position that, hey, we're willing to invest in the storage and let the emitters come. Because frankly, what we've seen is a lot of the emitters that we've spoke to, have negotiated, and the agreements that we have in place, they're inundated with companies coming to them. So they don't really know what to do. They're waiting to see how long it's going to take to get a Class 6 well. And in addition to a Class 6 well, you have to go through the whole gambit of a Class 5 science well. You have to get under the NEPA process or CCUS in California. You got to get 20 plus other permits. So we're seeing a lot of excitement in the space, and we're very excited about it. I don't know if I answered your question, Reed, all the way. I can just ramble on about this.
No, that was good. Going into this regional hubs thing, I kind of want you guys to talk to 2 points that we talked about in our one-on-one conversations, because I think everyone sees the logic for the high emission areas, but there's always challenges. And so the 2 challenges I want you guys to talk to is, existing infrastructure. It kind of gets used as, well, that's a no-brainer, just like depleted reservoirs, no-brainer. Slow your roll, that may not actually work. And 2, skilled craft, equipment, services in these areas is probably already in demand. So how are you going to secure the critical resources in terms of labor, equipment, and others to build these really complex assets? So from a regional hub, we've already heard about the goodness. Let's kind of take a look at where the challenge is going to be. And I'll let you guys decide who wants to start on this one.
Sorry. I think the first question was about regional hubs and kind of some of the challenges or ways that you can leverage existing infrastructure. We have found, again, through our affiliate ACTL up in Canada, we did an extensive study of converting gas pipelines to CO2. And we found that it's hard to make it work. There's a lot of technical risk around it once you get past a certain length, So for short haul, it actually can be doable, but for long haul, hundreds of miles, it's tough. So that's a big detriment to building out this infrastructure, because it basically means that if we're going to start connecting all these emission points and taking them to the 5 or 10 sequestration hubs in the U.S. that are viable and large, you're going to have to, it's all greenfield, it's all new build pipeline, and that costs a lot of money. I think one of the things that helps us from an infrastructure standpoint is that the value chain from capture to transport to sequestration is all de-risked. The capture for pure CO2 is compression and dehy. So it's established. We've been using that in the midstream oil and gas industry for decades. Transport is just thicker steel wall pipeline for dense phase CO2, and then sequestration is simply just geology and drilling a vertical well. So your second question touched on resource capabilities and availability. We're not terribly concerned about that in Illinois. Actually, what we found is that there's a huge amount of knowledge and resources in the state of Illinois that came from the days when the Illinois basin was a very highly productive oil basin. And so you've got a wealth of knowledge and drilling expertise in the area that has kind of gone dormant over the past 10 years as the Illinois basin has kind of been in a perpetual decline. So we're actually pretty excited at kind of the learning curve that we've gone past or achieved, and to help accelerate the development of the Mount Simon Hub, the Mount Simon Formation.
I'll touch on the subsurface piece of the workforce development. I think Dave with Chevron mentioned it earlier too. It's something that I believe the oil and gas industry is really excited about, transitioning a lot of the expertise and know-how over and essentially inverting the value chain, moving from coming out to going in. There's a lot of similarities in that process, but there's also a lot of differences. And it's there's going to be a lot of work to get that developed and get the people up to speed who are going to need to do the work. And I think everybody's up for the challenge, and we're real excited about it. But it's going to take some time. Along the lines of competing for resources and getting what's needed. I mean, that's going to be really tough. And we saw that in the last several years with the disruption in the supply chains. I mean, just getting oil field tubulars right now, anyone who's tried to order those in the last couple of years is just, it's insane right now, let alone, specialized metallurgy that may or may not be required for a specific CO2 project. If you want to add a little bit of chrome or Inconel to something, it's just off the charts what you're going to pay for it. So it's going to be incredibly challenging, and they're going to need to work through the supply chain issues to really deploy this at scale. And we're going to need to do that nationwide for sure.
I don't mind to address this. I think hubs regionally, depending on the locality or the geography, have a vast difference. We've executed an LOI with one of the largest publicly traded midstream companies that were developing a carbon hub here in the Gulf Coast. We've all agree with our counterparty that we're not going to reuse the pipes. They have pipes all through here. However, some of the right-of-ways work. And each right-of-way is bespoke. I don't see our general counsel, so I can give a legal opinion without him yelling at me probably. But some right-of-ways for midstream companies, and I'm not necessarily a midstream person, allow for carbon dioxide transmission lines. Obviously, the economies of scale when you can gather emitters and then also take leases along those right-of-ways. And we use the phrase hub. We use the phrase, rail stop or like a subway station because we can take molecules off and on along that line. So there are a lot of maybe not physical infrastructure that we're utilizing. We are utilizing, and I think Tracy mentioned it earlier, we're utilizing a lot of historical well bores. We're going to have to remediate, but we're using them for above zone and in zone monitoring wells. But yeah, we think the carbon hub concept is fantastic. It makes multiple emitters financeable and profitable that weren't previously profitable, and it makes locations that weren't financially viable earlier because of the distance from the source very viable. So.
Carlos, on the existing infrastructure for the Gulf of Mexico and that evaluation you did of the depleted wells, I think you had some intuition as to where the play would be in terms of short term. So why don't you kind of take that and tell the group?
Yeah, so we initially did with the work that we did with the depleted reservoirs, we really focused on the near shore environment and shallow water depths, similar to as we saw exploration for oil and gas proceed into the Gulf of Mexico. It started close in shallow water depths. And then as we began to build infrastructure, as we began to develop these areas, they would have the production hubs that they would feed out to back to the shore. So our insight would be if we would see something similar with CCS, where we've identified the potential areas for carbon storage, and we could have a production hub there in the sense of CO2 that would be able to pipe the CO2 to the other storage locations. Now, you asked me to talk about some of the plays. Those are really going back to the CO2 supercritical containment window of 3,000 to 10,000 feet. Now that upper window is really a function of your pressures and your temperatures to maintain the CO2 in its supercritical form. But the lower window is a depth to the overpressure. So that varies between, it can be shallow or greater than 10,000 feet. So we've just used a regional 10,000 foot cutoff for a lot of our analysis in identifying where we would see these types of plays exist across the Gulf of Mexico, and what plays we would see as we move spatially, going from the Miocene to the Pliocene, and cutting it off with with that depth to overpressure. So for the saline aquifer trend, that's kind of how we see the distribution of our sands and where we would see the plays. And one of the things that we're moving forward to and doing a regional assessment for the Gulf of Mexico with respect to CO2 storage.
I got one more thing to add about the hub conversation here that, I think is going to be really interesting is, especially with this, this new law, the BIL law, that, you see these direct air capture and just the threshold, how it's come down for any of the credits right now. And, definitely the hubs are what's going to be moving the needle on getting CO2 put away in a meaningful volume. You got to pipe in the massive volumes into one place. But there's going to be all these different stranded sources for one reason or another, whether it's an existing source or a new construction that's not going to be able to plug into those hubs. And just seeing how those develop and what services are out there and what technologies develop to help accelerate those and the adaption and the rapid adoption of the storage component for that. We can't ignore that stuff. We got to be able to serve those communities and those groups that are trying to develop that. And so definitely the regional hubs are going to be important for moving the needle, but we also need to be able to serve the folks that are out there and for whatever reason can't or don't want to plug into the hubs.
Excellent. Now let's jump into the regulatory side of things. And one of the observations I personally have is our industry and the different government agencies have a bit of work to do in terms of improving the collaboration. There's a lot of respect, there's a lot of good work that happens, but that active collaboration that when I think back over the last 80 years of our industry, there's a lot of stuff that the federal government and the state government did to lay down the beginnings of the industry, and then we picked it up, and that's what I'm hearing today. And when I talk to a lot of folks in the oil and gas industry, there's almost a reluctance to engage with the regulators because they view it as you're having to go in front of the judge and something bad's going to happen, as opposed to we're trying to create something new. We're laying down a lot of these programs that have been going through the right technical evaluations, and now we've got the funding. So everyone's heard about the Class 6 wells and the amount of years it takes. Kind of set that aside because there's also this is catastrophic stuff when you deal with the subsurface and you go putting something in there that may have a leak in a pathway that causes, so it's serious stuff. And it's also needed from a lot of the different energy sources that we are going to need that are carbon-based. So each of you have your own view as to what would be sort of like the right regulatory framework in terms of managing the risk, accelerating the opportunity, handling the necessary engineering and financing. So giving you some latitude, not giving you a key question, because I don't want it to be a grumpy discussion. I want it to be more constructive. This is what we want. We've heard from Tracy, we heard from Carlos. This is what they're trying to do. These are the same folks that are invested in this new industry like us. So you are the players who are having to go through it. You guys have gone through a lot of it. Just kind of take it and what would you say from a regulatory standpoint is your best case of what good would look like?
Yeah, so I think the biggest issue that we have in really maximizing the value of the Mount Simon Formation in Illinois is that the state of Illinois does not have a land unionization concept. Most oil and gas centric states like Texas or Colorado or North Dakota have a unionization concept where you get whether 51% or 60% of a unit that everyone else has to come in at the same kind of terms and conditions. We have to get every single acre in our pore space for a well, and negotiate with every single person in that kind of roughly 4,000 to 5,000 acres. And again, unlike West Texas or North Dakota, this is heavily parcelized. You don't have a guy who is sitting on a 5,000 or 20,000 acre ranch. So it's pretty intensive. And we've been working the area for a year and a half, and we're making some good progress. But to really accelerate, as the term that you use, to really accelerate the development and monetization of the Mount Simon Formation in Illinois, we need to get some unionization concepts in place in the legislature, and we are talking to state legislatures, state politicians. It does help that Indiana, their neighbor, is putting something into place. I think it's 61%. So that would be the main driver to accelerating development.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Nick. I think that's a big question mark in a number of different states. So a lot of states are quite a bit more advanced for whatever reason, but there's a lot of states that just aren't quite there yet in terms of unitization or pore space ownership or access. So that's a big challenge that each state's going to need to work through, and hopefully at a state legislative level they're looking at those and accelerating them. Because there's a lot of economic benefit on a state-by-state basis, let alone environmental benefit to hosting one of these projects. The other piece of the regulatory framework is, we talk about the UIC, the Class 6, right, the subsurface framework, and I think the critical thing to remember here is that that's a stakeholder engagement process, just like anything else. Those regulators, they've got a job to do, and their job is to protect the underground sources of drinking water. And so our job as operators or the folks building these sites is to make sure we characterize and scope out the project so that we can assure them and be confident that we're protecting the underground sources of drinking water. And I think if we're able to do that and, engage with those folks in a way that, facilitates that discussion, then we're gonna do a lot better and be a lot more effective in getting these projects executed. Now, there's no doubt about it, they're understaffed there, at least at the EPA level. We heard someone mention earlier today, I think it was Tracy or someone mentioned that they are getting more funding on a federal level. They're going to try to ramp up so that they can respond to the amount of stuff they've got coming in here. But at the same time, we're in a situation right now where they are understaffed for sure. So we just need to make sure we frame the conversation in a way that they can understand and it addresses what they're trying to achieve.
For me, I just want to hear the flip side. I'd like to hear the comments coming in once this draft proposal gets out into the public for public review. We made every attempt to do what we can in this year that was given to us for the deadline to develop a robust and comprehensive rule. But learning from or hearing from industry and those that are going to be doing these operations, can provide that perspective. We did have the extensive outreach, and we did that and conducted that for months, and had a variety of stakeholders that we spoke to. But hearing from the operators is going to be an important part of the process that we're looking forward to coming, when the draft is released for public comment.
Was the question just, it's Christmas morning, Charles, what do you want for the regulators for your business? Is that basically it?
What would you say good looks like from a regulatory environment, knowing the responsibility they have and then what you're trying to drive?
Yeah, first of all, I think I think it's all heading in the right direction. This is a frontier area for sure. The EPA has done a wonderful job of normalizing, and giving some guidelines under the CFRs. Right now, for instance, we have 2 applications in Louisiana, open Class 6 well applications, and we're copying the LDNR, Steve Lee, in his office because they've applied for primary authority or primacy. In the state of Texas here, you need to, and we are required to, copy the Texas Railroad Commission on all of these things. And they're following the same guidelines as I understand it. I really think the only thing would make our job easier, and they can't do anything about it right now, is we just need more precedent, right? So right now we have rules. We know what we need to do. We need to establish that we don't affect underground drinking water, and we have to stay within the zone of confinement. But we don't really have a roadmap for what does it look like to get through that application. What science do you need to get in the Class 5 well? How far into the seismic do you need to get? Do you need a new chute? And it's our job as a developer to convince the EPA that we will not infect the underground drinking water. So all the right steps are going in the right direction. We just need advancement and precedent. I think the more wells that get permitted for injection provides the rest of us, I forget the phrase that was used earlier, competition and collaboration at the same time. We'll collaborate more.
Cool. And I know there'll be about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to tee up one question that you may not have the answer to, which is fine, but then for the audience, if you have any questions you want, we can give you a few minutes to think about that. So from a technology standpoint, we know that a lot of the stuff that we're using today is going to be replaced over the next 10 years by advances and that innovation cycle. So what are you excited about? What are you looking at going, okay, that's going to be some cool stuff. It's maybe a little bit on the horizon, but I can tell it's going to really make a difference. So I'll let you take it from there.
sequestration or just decarbonization?
Let's keep it at decarbonization.
Okay, so I'm really excited about mineralization. Okay, doing something with CO2 to create a usable product, or doing something other than shoving it in the ground. And we've talked to a lot of emitters who are really excited about that too, because they just kind of see it as, right now they see it as a waste, and there is technology on the horizon that could actually make it a commodity, and we're exploring actually the IRA bill did so many things to kind of position the U.S. as now the leader in decarbonization. And one of the things that they did was the hydrogen credit to really incentivize green hydrogen. And so one thing that we're looking at is taking the CO2 and creating green methanol through electrolysis of the hydrogen. That technology is today. That's been around. So we don't have to wait 10 years for that. And the shipping industry, and some other industries that consume a lot of dirty fuel are starting to, there's a sea change going on that is really trending towards methanol, green methanol, as the alternative fuel to the fossil-based fuels they're using right now. So very exciting stuff. We're still kind of in the first or second inning of that concept, but that's what I'm excited to see over the next 10 years.
For me, what's really exciting in the industry now is just the state of subsurface characterization and bringing in big data analytics to make informed decisions about operating and developing a site. We're really just kind of at the tip of the iceberg with what we can do. We've got so many different technologies out there for monitoring and understanding what's going on with the subsurface, whether it be distributed strain sensing through fiber optics or, acoustic monitoring or, advanced temperature monitoring, et cetera, and bringing all that data in a real-time way to make informed decisions as you're operating a site or going to drill wells or, decide if you're going to slow down injection, increase injection. Getting those tools in front of people who can, need to make the decisions is just something super exciting to me. I'm really excited to see where the big data analytics and machine learning goes with that.
For me, I'm looking forward to a carbon project in the offshore Gulf of Mexico. I mean, this is new for BOEM. This is going to be new for the offshore OCS. So that's exciting. I tell everybody that I work with, I'm like, this is history right here. You're living it, you're working it, and you're making it. So let's get to work.
I would say sort of write what you know and paint what you know. We're focused on heavy industry, and I'm most excited about some of the solvent technologies. I mean, we're rooting for all the technologies. I mean, we're all in this room. Yes, we have to make money. We have families, but we're here to decarbonize the world, right, and really make a difference. And what I'm most excited about is the performance that some of the separation technology is achieving. You think about Petronova, I think it was like a 92%, which was great, MHI at the time, or 94% success rate. We're getting performance guarantees in the 99+%, so we're really making a difference. And secondarily, just kind of overseas, I'm excited to see so many projects and technology being deployed because we're only a percentage of our globe, right? So we need China, India, Europe obviously is doing a great job and other areas, but that's what I'm probably most excited about.
Excellent. So questions from the audience?
Mark Kazi with Chevron. So going back to the regional hub discussion, right? So I know we talk a lot about the Midwest ethanol plants as an opportunity, but it's very low technology risk on the capture side. It seems like a hub component for deployment on scale makes a lot of sense. As you look to industrial emissions, take Texas Gulf Coast, for example, where it's still not clear for some emission sources what the technology of choice will be. There's still a lot of learning that needs to happen. How do we balance that tension of a hub development approach, right? Large-scale infrastructure, pre-investing, so we can easily add emission sources, with the fact that we're still trying to learn what technology works best, so we're still in that experimentation phase. So curious just from the panelists, if we start too small and doing this piloting, maybe we missed an opportunity to size that well bigger, or size that pipeline bigger. Who's kind of carrying that risk right now? And how do we manage that hub when we're still trying to really come down the cost curve on the capture side of the area?
So actually, where we are in the Midwest, the eastern area, is actually, this is another reason we chose the eastern Midwest, is because it's not just ethanol, there's a ton of heavy industry in the Chicago metro area, St. Louis, then you go east into the Ohio River Valley, ton of cement plants, steel plants. And so, we take a long-term approach to our investment. CDP is kind of a build and hold life of asset company or fund. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to, you hit the key word there, what's the balance, right? And what we're trying to do is we're trying to maximize the size of our pipe under the economics of what is achievable today, knowing that capture technology for more diluted industrial CO2 streams is just around the corner from a scalability standpoint. And we know that if we have that capacity, excess capacity on the line, if we build it, they will come. So that's what we're doing.
I'm going to agree with Nick, and first of all, I'm going to say I don't think Chevron should do a hub on the Gulf Coast. I think it's a horrible idea. No one else should, by the way. No, in all seriousness, I'm right with Nick. We're kind of decided, look, we're our partners and I have decided we're going to start with a 20-inch line. We think that'll move 20 million tons a year. We've located enough pore space that we think we can dispose of it safely, that we can convince the EPA and the Texas Railroad Commission that we can do it safely there. We started discussions with emitters, but they're so inundated with guys like you at Chevron and Oxy and everybody else coming to them. So we're taking the position that, look, start, I wouldn't say small, but start with that sort of something that is bite size and start executing on those and hopefully if we build it, they will come. And, the line that we're building, it's not a single carrier. It's not for us. So we were going to do a minimum commitment. But we were trying to sign as many emitters as we can once we get there. Thanks.
Mark, I think it's a great question. How do you operationalize the ambitious, discussions that we're having here today? I mean, it's kind of the crux of the question, right? And I like the notion of letting the market make the decisions for you. The people putting the money in are going to be the ones making the decisions on what is the right size.
Any questions from the audience?
Free.
I have that question because the question I have is that you mentioned that you guys are looking about certain pipelines for a certain medium of this right now. Given what we talked about with potentially we're looking at organization and looking at communities and where we want to build once, and that's something we're always thinking about is building a pipeline and thinking about other sides. Do you guys have a point of economics and business models? Is that the role of the business actually and the other sides of the no potential economy? Does that discussion happen and what are you going to happen?
I think I heard, Tracy, I think I heard your question right. I'm sorry, I'm a little deaf. What was it? With the question, essentially, I'm going to try to surmise it. Is there a financial break point? At what point did you make the size of the line? Was that it? Forgive me. Yeah, so for us, starting in the Texas Gulf Coast, and we're trying to find the right partners in Louisiana right now. But in the Texas Gulf Coast, we've decided that 20-inch line was the right way to start, with sufficient right of way that we could build more lines on that or larger lines as they go along. That's just been the discussions that we've internalized right now. And again, we're in an LOI phase, and they're taking right of way, and we're developing the sites.
Sorry about that. Captain Ray from the Celebration. To follow along on the pipeline conversation, we heard from the DOE that they're considering all forms of just like to hear from you guys, is it a pipeline across these projects, or are there potentially other forms of transport that kind of get you around the hurdle of having to get these pipelines permitted?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that we're looking into right now. As I mentioned, there's a lot of heavy industry centers in the eastern Midwest, but they happen to be urban areas. They're in the middle of Chicago or St. Louis, or even just just kind of some suburb areas where it's hard to get a pipe directly to that emission plant. So we're actually talking to railroad companies who are looking at kind of taking cryogenically liquefied CO2 and moving it through unit trains to a central delivery point on our trunk line. And the rail infrastructure around here is pretty robust. So almost every major facility in the area already is connected to rail. So it's not really a long putt to kind of imagine that other form of transportation kind of help enhance our economy as well.
Cool. Well, I think we're out of time. I want to thank the panelists, and we'll transition now.